Okay, moving on though to, we had a question that came in on the live feature. Hi, have you any advice on how I can help my 14-year-old ASD son understand turn taking during conversations? And many thanks. What a great question. And that just came in on the live feature, proving that the live feature works. Yeah.
Hey, you know what? If he is interested in a conversation, there's a bunch of components that need to be. A lot of times giving a concrete example actually is the easiest one. And sometimes it's as easy as, and it's a speech way, is you have a block or an object, and whoever has the block gets to talk.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's starting that simple, because within conversations, the breaks and lulls, you have to actually teach a child to recognize what those breaks and lulls are. And a lot of times it's just not, it's too subtle and it's not clear enough. So a lot of times it's taking an old speech technique and just showing them that when this block is in front of you, it's your turn to talk, and when the block moves, it goes to someone else, and just teaching him to recognize that. But there are a lot of skills besides turn taking that are involved, because he has to be able to turn take with something that's a lot easier too. You know, a very simple game, a very simple interaction that is very clear, and understanding how turn taking works. And once you get that going, then you go into actually social conversation. And social conversation involves a lot. It's not just one small piece. And I would say that one of the first aspects of learning how to turn take is you have to make sure that your child is listening and knows how to listen.
Yeah.
You know, are they actually listening to the other person talk? Because if they don't listen to the other person talk, they're not getting information, but they don't even know to listen for those breaks and lulls.
Yeah.
That are cues to be able to turn take.
And I will say this, that all of these things that Evelyn is talking about are lessons in skills.
They are.
I don't have my little tree tent anymore. I don't know what happened to it. We moved stuff around and it disappeared. But there's a tool, an online tool called Skills for Autism. And you don't have to be a card person to have access to it. It's available for a subscription price to families, to schools, or other organizations that provide ABA. You can go to skillsforautism.com, and it's the number 4, correct? Skillsforautism.com, and ask for a free tour for them to show you around. It's a big tool. It does a lot of stuff. I think that most parents find themselves very overwhelmed and going, I need to know more to be able to do this. And I always say, no, you really don't. Just pick what you want to do. It's just like, you don't know how to do everything that your smartphone does, trust me. And you don't know how to do everything your computer does. But you use it the way it works for you, and somebody next to you uses it in a different way. This is a big tool. Use it the way, like if you sit there and go, I want to know, because we've got a question that's coming up next about self-regulation. I want to know about how to teach self-regulation to my 11-year-old. Then you go in and answer the questions about self-regulation, and you can pick from lessons to do for self-regulation. Now, it'd be great if you did the whole assessment, right? I can see you going, I'd rather you do that. But if you need to get started on something, you can just go in and pick one thing and see what the lessons are.
Yeah, and I always say, actually, do what matters to you, because when you go in, it's going to tell you some prerequisite skills.
Yes.
And then what will happen is, it's like, in order to do this lesson, you have to know these things, and then you're going to have to go back and probably answer some of those questions.
Yes.
You know, and especially with language. Language is one of these things where initially I always say basic speech and language is just understanding the words, syntax, how words go together, you know, how to ask a question. And then you go into social language. And that social language in skills is under social.
Right.
You know, it jumps over because it requires the person to be looking at someone else, listening to someone else, understand that if I am talking to you and I'm at a baseball game, I'm going to have to yell even though the rule is no yelling.
Right. Right.
You know, or if I go into a library, I need to whisper, because it's really quiet in there and you don't want to bother people. And just understanding, how do you know someone?
Right.
That regulates what you're going to say and not say too. And so there's all these different components in social interaction and social language that are involved in turn taking, and you know, how long you wait for someone. A lot of our kids on the spectrum, especially the higher functioning kids, don't understand authority.
Yeah.
You know, so they get really upset that they're not allowed to do what this 18-year-old or 20 or 50-year-old's doing. And, you know, they're sitting there as a 14-year-old demanding that they should have the same. And they just don't even understand that idea of no with authority, you know, depending on who's in charge at the moment. And if they're telling you what to do, you kind of have to listen.
Right.
Or you can get in big trouble.
Right.
And so there's a lot of components in social interaction that are involved. And, you know, it might seem easy just to turn take in a conversation. But it's hard, and a lot of times you get into those executive function skills of maybe they are listening, but they just can't stop vocally.
Yeah.
You know, and so then you're working on just vocal inhibition, learning how not to like blurt out, and that might be all you practice for a while. And you know, there's all these different ways that people can learn to do that.
And, you know, like I said, there's many different ways and skills that you can look at things. You could go in and take the assessment, and then the assessment will say, here are the pool of lessons, and then you can see by the number where the starter ones are. Or you could just go in and in the search feature type in the thing that you want, like conversation taking turns. It'll show you that lesson. You go in and you open that lesson, and it says, here are the prerequisites. Then you have to go find those lessons. And sometimes those lessons say, well, the precursor for this, and you go, oh, my child can't do that either, and it's like putting it together backwards. But either way works.
Yeah, and
if you're working with a professional, I'm sorry not to interrupt you, but if you're working with a professional, they help you to see that clearly from the beginning, and that's what a BCBA is great for. But if you don't have that, you can put it together yourself in skills.
Yeah, and you can, and a lot of you know I always tell all our behavior analysts, the parents know the kids best.
Well, that's true,
you know?
But we don't, there are things,
there's things that you don't think about. No, but there's things that you don't think about, but you know your kid.
Yeah.
So the thing is, when you're getting some kind of information, whether it's from your behavior analyst or from skills, you have to actually be able to say honestly to yourself.
Yeah.
In this context, I'm listening to this information or I'm reading this. Can my child do this?
Right.
And really, you know whether you're telling them to, and you have to be honest.
Right. But the great thing is if they can't do that, then you go to the precursor skill. Well, can they do that?
Yeah.
And if they can't, well, then what's the thing before that? And you might find yourself all the way back at the beginning in teaching joint attention. But for me, like, I didn't know what a joint attention was when I had my child. I just knew that something wasn't the same as everybody else. And I always still love to go to Disneyland. And it's almost like a bruise like to push against a bruise, and sometimes it feels a little bit better. But I watch parents with their 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds and not having to hold their hand while they're standing in line. And I go, what's that? Because I don't know about that. And I watch. I can picture there was this one woman who was with her little 2-year-old who was all dressed in like Minnie Mouse kinds of polka dots, and they were standing waiting in line for something, and they're just waiting, and then at some point the mom like said something to the little girl, and she said, oh, look at that, and the little girl looked. She didn't have to move her head. The little girl looked, and then they looked at each other and they were laughing about it, and I was like, that can happen with a 2-year-old, because that wasn't happening with my kid. That just wasn't there. And he would have run if I didn't have a hold of him and just run, not to anything or anyone, just to run to feel the wind in his hair. And forget, if I pointed to something, his attention wasn't on me, so he didn't look at it. If I turned his head to look at it, then he would look at it, but there was no checking in with me. And sometimes that, I make the little symbol of the joint attention. Sometimes it goes all the way back to there. And when you learn that skill, then a whole bunch of other things happen. So.
Definitely. So yeah, don't get disappointed. There's a lot of things there. You know your kid. Be honest with what you think he knows or doesn't know. Because if you're not honest with yourself, then you're going to assume that there are certain skills there, and then he'll have a hard time learning it, and you'll say it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because there's a base skill missing. And a lot of times if you go back and teach those base skills, the child actually gains a bunch of other skills on their own independently without having to be taught, just because that base skill is now there, that they on their own can go and learn.
Crazy good stuff happens when you, because it's the Swiss cheese thing, that they're there and they have skills, but there's holes, right? And when you start filling in a hole, all kinds of things happen because of that. I get really excited. Hey, thanks Thanks for watching Autism Live. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.